on this Facebook Live. We call it Daily Doc, do it a couple times a week. And what I want to do is go ahead and give you some headlines, some news you've probably heard over the last few days. Get behind those headlines to give you a better understanding of what that means, and particularly what it means for you, your family, your loved ones, and your community, and hopefully how it can help you get through this pandemic sooner and safer. That's my hope behind this, and then also answer some questions you might have. So if you have questions, please send them our way. I'll go ahead and get to as many of those as I can. But first, let me start with the headlines. It's been a very, very busy week because, as you know, our government's administration, the president's administration changed, and that means a change in how things are going to be done with the actual pandemic and trying to get the pandemic under control. And I'll certainly talk about that in a minute, but they also had a conference yesterday where they talked about a variety of things. President Biden, Dr. Fauci talked about things concerning the pandemic and what the administration is going to do, and some information we might need to know about. But probably the biggest news along with that are the variants that are out there. And you've probably heard a lot about these variants, so I certainly want to talk about that for a little bit. But what yesterday came out of this is Dr. Fauci in his White House briefing actually said that there are three variants that we're looking at. One is what's called the UK variant. The other one is what's called the South African variant. And then the third one is the Brazilian variant. But when you think of the South African variant, put it in the same category as the Brazilian variant, because those two are almost alike. UK variant, a little bit different. So he split those into two different categories. And what he was saying yesterday is, looking at all the information, the UK variant, we do get a little concerned about it, but not terribly worried for a couple of reasons. Number one, we know it's more infectious than the variants that are out there right now. And it's also taking a big foothold in England and here in the United States, as a matter of fact. Here in the U.S., we've noticed it in 20 states. Around the world, 30 plus countries have already noticed it. Here in the U.S., they even admitted that our surveillance system isn't all that good, so we don't exactly know how prevalent it is, but it is possible that by March, and this is what the administration has said, by March, it could become the dominant variant here in the U.S. Now, the reason this is concerning is because even though this variant is more infectious, in other words, you can catch it and transmit it easier, up until now, it looks like it doesn't cause more complications and it doesn't cause more deaths on a one-to-one basis. And that's something I think we all need to understand. So on a one-to-one basis, if you get it, your chances of having complications or dying from it are the same as the variants that have been around here since the beginning of the pandemic. Not much different, but your chances of getting it are higher than they've been in the past. And that's the concerning thing, because at some point it turns into a numbers routine where the more numbers we get, the more cases we get, the more hospitalizations and complications we get, and the more deaths we get. So even though on a one-to-one basis of somebody getting it and whether it affects them or not, we know at this point it doesn't look like it's causing any more complications or any more deaths on an overall population basis if more people are getting it, because it's more contagious, it's more able to infect people, then those numbers are going to go higher. So overall, it could prove to be a deadlier virus than the variants that have been out there already. And so we need to keep a close eye on it. But one thing he did say is, looking at our treatments, particularly monoclonal antibodies, and looking at our vaccines, especially the ones that are out there here in the U.S., Pfizer and Moderna, they look to be effective against this virus, the UK variant. So that's good news. Let's switch to the South African variant. The South African variant has not been detected here in the U.S., but admittedly, our surveillance system is not that good. So it's possibly here. We just don't know it at this point. But if it is, it's not very prevalent, and hopefully it stays that way. But what they're saying is, and this is what Dr. Fauci said in his press briefing yesterday, is that it looks like our therapeutics, our monoclonal antibody therapeutics, aren't as effective against this South African variant. And you could probably put Brazilian variant in the same category, but they still seem to work to a certain extent. The other thing he said, which I think got more people's attention, is that the vaccine itself might not be as effective against the South African variant or the Brazilian variant as it is against the UK or the other variants that are out there. But you have to listen to this very carefully. He's saying not as effective. That's different than not effective. And what he mentioned is something called the cushion effect. And what the cushion effect basically means is these vaccines are so effective against the virus they were targeting, the variant they were targeting, 95% effective, that we have some cushion room. We have some room that if that effectiveness drops down a little bit, then it would still work very well on a population basis. And so that's important to remember, because that means that us getting the vaccine can still help put an end to this pandemic. won't necessarily need another vaccine, but they'll certainly keep an eye on it to see if it changes more and if they need to reformulate that vaccine. But right now, as of now, they're saying no, the vaccines we're getting should work. Another thing to remember about the vaccine, when we talk about that 95% effectiveness, or possibly even dropping it down to 80 or 70% effectiveness against the South African variant, that's effectiveness at not getting COVID-19, at not getting the disease itself and not getting complications from it. And what they found in the studies is not getting serious disease. In other words, those serious complications that put you in an intensive care unit and can result in death. In the studies, it was proven to be 100% effective for that. And so overall, fantastic vaccines. I've gotten my first dose of the Pfizer vaccine, waiting a couple more weeks to get the second dose. I did a Facebook Live on it if you want to take a look at that. Again, this is one of the tools we have to get it under control, but it's not the only tool. And they mentioned that it looks like it's going to be some months to get things back in line. So anyway, on the variant, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this cushion effect with the vaccines that can help out. We're talking about the fact these variants are out there and we need to keep an eye on them, but don't panic about them. But the other thing this is important for you to understand is the way variants work, the way viruses work and to develop these variants. So a variant basically means that enough mutations of the strain have happened that it makes it different. It makes it able to infect more. And in this case, using this is my coronavirus prop here. If you look here, these are the different spikes we talk about, and these are spike proteins. On these spikes themselves, if the mutations are on the spike, when it hits the cell wall, it can attach much more easily. And once it attaches more easily, the virus can get into the cell and do its work to replicate, to duplicate itself and develop more viruses. That's what they do. Well, the only way it can mutate is if it gets into our cell and then it mutates. The vast majority of these, and these mutations happen all the time, there's billions of them happening. The vast majority of these are mutations that actually make the virus not work as well. They're what are called deleterious mutations. They don't work as well. But every now and then, and mutations are definitely mistakes in that pattern, every now and then a mistake or a mutation will occur that actually gives it some benefit. And that's what we're seeing with the UK variant, the South African, the Brazilian variant. Some of those cases, it can keep mutating more and more and cause even more issues. But it can only mutate, remember what I said, if it gets into our bodies, if it gets into our cells. So the best way to stop these mutations is to stop it from getting into our bodies. Masks, social distancing, washing our hands, avoiding large groups, getting vaccinated. These are the tools we have to get it under control. Once we start getting it under control, these variants won't be happening as often because the mutations won't be happening as often, and we'll better be able to end the pandemic. So that's it with the variants. Moving on to what the Biden administration is now saying, and particularly looking at the vaccine. So up until now, and I'm looking at current data here from the CDC, almost 38 million doses have been pushed out there. To date, 17 million doses have actually been administered, shots in arm. Of those, around 15 million are given to people who have gotten the first dose. So some of these are duplicate doses, but about 15 million people have gotten the dose of the vaccine out of 37 million that have been distributed. That means there's 17 million shots or 15 million shots out there that are still in refrigerators, still in freezers, haven't been given to people. And that's a big conundrum for the administration coming in because they don't quite understand why that's happening. And they're making big pushes to try and make sure that they get that under control. A couple of things they're doing, I think are going to work out very, very well, is number one, is they're giving the states assistance. Because up until now, the states have said, this is fine. You've distributed the vaccine to us. You've relied on us to administer it, but we need help administering it. We need financial help to be able to hire the people to administer. We need logistic help to be able to communicate with the White House and the task force what we need and what we don't need in particular, whether it's PPE or these vaccines. And so a couple of things they've done. Number one, Biden administration has made a pledge to have 100 shots in 100 days. Remember, he took over January 20th, 2 days ago, so 100 days would be the end of April, the last day of April. He's saying in that time frame, he wants 100 shots out there, 100 shots administered. And so that's a very large goal. Some experts are saying should be easy. Other experts are saying, I don't know, it's going to be kind of tough. It'll be interesting to see, but they're pushing forward a lot of finances, a lot of different logistical support they can to try and get people help and the states help they need, particularly getting them to communities of underserved people that need them. and they're saying, okay, we need to get those there. So how do we do that? And part of what they're talking about are having mass vaccination events. These are at stadiums. These are possibly at concert halls or arenas. And they're also saying we want to open it up so pharmacies can start having it as well. So you can walk into a pharmacy like you do to get your flu shot and get a COVID-19 vaccine as well. The new head of the CDC has said that's not going to happen in February, probably be a little later before that happens, but it will happen at some point. And what President Biden said is that he basically said a couple things. One is that we are going to get through this pandemic. Help is on the way, and it's going to take months to turn this thing around. This is not going to turn around overnight, so he's asking for a lot of patience. But one of the things he's doing, which I think is fantastic, is up until now, they have been looking at getting people to go to where the vaccines are. What he's trying to push forward is to get the vaccines to where the people are, to make it much more convenient for them much more easily able to get there. Because frankly, some people aren't able, they don't have the transportation to get there. They don't have the time off from work to get there. They don't have the time off from childcare to get there. And so he's trying to get it where it's more convenient, it's in their communities, and that's pushing forward. Part of what he's doing there are developing these state liaisons, and they talked about that. They're going to have a liaison from every state up at the federal level who can go ahead and help them with understanding what the state needs in particular. And I call this the New Zealand example because I talked to one of the infectious disease doctors in New Zealand on a Facebook Live back, I believe it was March, April timeframe. And I said, what are you guys doing right? And what can we learn from this? They said, one of the things we're doing is we're actually getting people in every different locale and we're bringing them up to the country level. And then we have these meetings every day over Zoom, and we're saying, what do you particularly need? Let us know. At the time, it was PPE they were concerned with. Do you have enough PPE? Are you short of PPE? If you have enough, if you have extra, and this other place is short, can we ship some over there? Can we change it to get to them instead of you guys, since you don't need it? Those types of coordinations need to take place at a higher level, and that's what President Biden is now saying. The other thing, Dr. Fauci said that by the end of the summer, he's hoping that 75 to 80%, in the best case scenario, will be vaccinated so that by the fall we can start, as he says, approaching a degree of normalcy. In other words, we can get closer to a new normal, and that's what he's considering the best case scenario. But that, of course, means getting the vaccines to the people and people getting the vaccines. And part of that is making sure that we understand the trust behind the vaccines, that the government understands what they need to do to get us that trust, and they keep communicating with us, and at the same time telling us when things have changed. Because as science goes, particularly science in a short-term period like this, we learn things all the time. Information changes, and the important part is to make sure that they get out there and they say, hey, I know at one point we told you this, but we have new data that says we need to change it a little bit. Now we're telling you this, and we're going based off the best science we have at the moment. And so again, that's very, very important, a very important thing to understand. And so looking at what we talked about here, the variant, it's out there. It's possible that it could cause more issues, especially the South African, if it takes a foothold here. But the vaccines look like they'll be effective against them. The treatment, for the most part, effective against them. However, they can prove to be deadlier on a community level basis. If more people get the infections, more people are going to be hospitalized and die from it. And so we all need to do our part to keep it under control. The more we keep it under control, the less variants we're going to have because they work by getting into our body. And then the Biden administration talking about vaccines, talking about help at the community level, talking about those things to try and make sure that we get the pandemic under control through the tools that we have right now. But let me go ahead and see if you guys have any questions.
Do you have to take both shots from the same company?
So the question is, do you have to take both shots from the same company? The short answer is yes. So these shots, the two Pfizer and Moderna shots, work on the same principle, which is called the mRNA vaccine. It uses a little capsule of what's called polyethylene glycol to deliver this mRNA to the cell, and the cell develops a spike protein that your immune system notices and starts fighting against, which builds up your immunity. However, there are differences in the vaccines. So in the ideal world, you want to get the Moderna vaccine 1, and then you want to get the Moderna vaccine 2. You want to get the Pfizer vaccine 1 and the Pfizer vaccine 2. Now, theoretically, if you can only get one and you have to switch it, the scientists are looking at it right now to see if that's possible. But overall, they want you to make sure you get the same one. Now, Johnson & Johnson will be coming out here fairly soon with their information looking for emergency use authorization. That's a single-dose vaccine, which is going to make it easier for some people in some locales across the country. But if you got a Moderna vaccine, your best bet is to get the second Moderna vaccine. If you got a Pfizer vaccine, get the second Pfizer vaccine.
Is it true that the vaccine has nanotech in them? Is that mRNA?
So they're asking about if the vaccine has nanotech in them, which I'm not exactly sure what they mean by nanotech. I know there were some concerns with people, and especially people that are talking about conspiracy type theories, that there are microchips in there. There are no microchips in this vaccine. What it contains is what's called mRNA, which is messenger RNA. And that is a genetic code. And think about like somebody on a computer developing a code. It's a genetic code that goes inside this polyethylene glycol capsule. That polyethylene glycol capsule is made so that it can be transported from the shot into the muscle cell and into the actual inner cell of the muscle. And so what happens is it gets into the cell. That polyethylene glycol attaches to the outside of the cell wall. It dissolves, and it ends up getting the mRNA into the cell. Once it gets into the cell, it goes into the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is where that mRNA, nothing is done with it other than it gets decoded. And when it gets decoded, it develops a protein. And that's how our mRNAs work. It develops that protein, which then goes out from the cell, and the immune system recognizes it as a foreign protein. In this case, it's a spike protein from the coronavirus, and it says we need to fight against that. Let's develop an army that can attack it. And so if this virus ever comes along, the army knows what to attack and can do it very, very quickly. Now, what it does not do is this mRNA does not go into the nucleus of the cell. The nucleus of the cell is where our DNA lives. And that is where people are saying, can it alter my DNA? No, because it doesn't get into the nucleus. It stays in the cytoplasm where there is no DNA to alter. And so, again, it's a very safe method of making a vaccine and a very safe vaccine.
Is it safe to get vaccinated if I've had cancer or something more debilitating like that?
So the question is it safe to get vaccinated if I've had cancer or something more debilitating like that? The overall answer is yes. As a matter of fact, it's safe to get vaccinated because it is possible that your immune system is a little bit weaker or a little bit slower and needs the development of this vaccine on your immune system to develop what you need to fight off the virus. Now, if you're undergoing cancer therapy right now, especially if you're undergoing immunotherapy for cancer or for any disease, you definitely need to talk to your doctor about what's a good time to take the coronavirus. And it's not because the coronavirus is going to hurt you or hurt your treatment. It's because your immune system, if you're going through immunotherapy, won't be strong enough to react to the coronavirus. And so it won't develop those antibodies that you need at the level that you need them, or possibly won't. And so what you need to do is talk to your doctor about the optimum time to get the vaccine. But especially if you have pre-existing medical conditions. Mainly we're talking diabetes, cancer, heart disease, those types, and obesity, those types of pre-existing medical conditions. It puts you at a higher risk of complications. Even more important that you get the vaccine to protect yourself as much as you can.
Why aren't we focusing on trying to kill the coronavirus rather than avoid it? What about hydrogen peroxide?
So the question is, why aren't we concentrating more or focusing more on trying to kill the virus rather than trying to avoid the virus? And because it's impossible to kill all the virus out there. If you think about it, in a room like this virus could potentially be anywhere. And I need to exist in this room. I need to live and breathe in this room. And I can't kill all the viruses that are in this room without harming myself as well. So I need to make sure that I avoid the viruses as best I can. And that means doing the things we always talk about. Wearing a mask, and I'll talk about masks in just a second, washing our hands, social distancing, avoiding groups, especially with people who don't live under our own roof, ventilate as much as possible. Those things we can do to avoid it. And then we talk about the vaccine on top of that. The vaccine can give us, a bit more avoidance because the virus might not be able to get into our body, but it also gives a bit more what we call therapeutics. If the virus gets into our body, then we can fight it off more. And that's one of the claims to fame for the virus. Now, one of the things I want to mention about the mask is there's been some questions lately about, do I need the double mask? Do I need more than a mask to help myself out? Some experts are saying, yes, if you're in a crowded situation where you can't social distance, you can't get away from people, you might want to think about double masking. But the CDC and a lot of experts are saying, as long as your mask is 2 or 3 layers, then it's a sufficient mask, especially if you're incorporating it with the other measures. And one of the things we found out is none of these measures by themselves can protect us from coronavirus, but putting them all together can give us the most protection we can get out there. If you look at this mask, it's a 2-layer mask. And so in some situations it might not be sufficient, but at the same time it has a pocket here, and we have little filter inserts we can put in here that can give us basically the equivalent of N95 protection. If you're in a situation where you're around people and you can't avoid them, and there's a high risk of getting coronavirus, especially if you have situations or conditions that'll put you at high risk for complications, then you might want to think about double masking. Some people even talk about triple masking. But you do have to be aware that if you get too many masks on, you're not going to be able to breathe as well. So make sure before you do that you can breathe. But in every situation, definitely don't need a double mask, but in some situations you might. But as I tell people, any mask, 2 to 3 layer masks, better than no masks. Overall though, cloth masks, the next level, the surgical masks, the little rectangular masks we talk about, and then the N95 masks. But those take it to the level where most of us probably don't need it at that point. But again, thank you for your questions. They've all been fantastic. What we talked about at the beginning, just to summarize that, are the variants that are out there. The UK variant, which is already here in the US, and by some estimates is going to be the dominant variant in the next month or so. It is more infectious, meaning it's more contagious. You can catch it more, you can spread it more, but it doesn't appear to be any more deadly on a one-to-one basis. But on a population basis, because more people will get it, then more people will have complications from it and more people will die from it. And so we need to be very careful there. And then the South African/Brazilian variant, which it looks like our vaccines might not be as effective, but that's the key word, but they'll still be effective against it and against preventing complications if you do end up getting it. And then some of the therapies we have, monoclonal antibodies, might not be as effective as it would with other variants. We can all do our part to keep variants under control by avoiding coronavirus. Doing the things we need to do to stay safe will help with that as well. And then the Biden administration, 100 shots in 100 days is what he's looking at. It's a daunting task, but hopefully they can do that. In order to do that, they're talking about a lot of the logistics and supply chain issues they're going to be working out, getting states the help they need, getting state liaisons at the federal level who can tell them what the help they need, because this is 50 states plus lots of territories that need help. And so at the federal level, it's hard to understand that. And I think over the next few weeks, possibly next month or so, you'll see a lot of this ironed out. But in the meanwhile, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And as always, I hope you, your family, your loved ones stay as happy and as healthy as always. Thanks a lot.
Are you a fan of our videos? Be sure to subscribe to Worldwide Campus News and Entertainment. Then ring the bell to see all notifications about the new videos and the latest video.